Good evening, everyone. Welcome to weekly Dr. Cohen's lectures, and we are very excited to give you some exciting news that we are opening our practice for in-person visits, and we, will be following strict CDC guidelines to see you here at the office. Masks will be required. Some questionnaires will be required to answer before you come to the office. Of course, we will be sanitizing and practicing social distancing here at the office. So very excited to see you all. Starting July 1st, you can book in-person appointments, and we will be spacing out so you guys don't have to meet anybody in the hallway. And there are no waiting rooms for now, so you will be waiting in a car for your appointment once you arrive. But anyhow, tonight we have a very exciting lecture with Dr. Cohen, and he will be talking about journey back to self. And Dr. Cohen has a lot of experience, through his life. He traveled around the world and studied different modalities and different religions, different herbal practices, indigenous and modern. And he draws this knowledge from his very varied and wide background. So I hope you're going to enjoy, and as usual, I'll be tracking your questions, participate in the discussion. The lecture is going to be about 45 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes, as usual, is going to be the meditation. And the other exciting news, that longevity formula is in production as of today.
Oh, wow.
And we will be updating you on the availability probably 2 weeks from now, 2 to 3 weeks from now. We'll be able to start selling the first bottles of longevity formula. So very exciting evening, very excited to see you all, and thank you as always being part of our community, so supportive and so inspiring for us to continue to do better things and greater work in the world. Dr. Cohen.
Thank you. So finally finished with longevity. It only took me how many years? 25 years or 30 years, something like that. And I'm going to look, there's a startup company in Menlo Park that had a way of testing the length of the telomeres, which are the appendage to the chromosomes that have a correlation towards longevity. Now, I was thinking about longevity. Why did I go back to this? Because I was asked to do this many years ago. Is that if you have a long life, it means you outlived all the stresses of your time. And we have so many stresses at the moment that it would take a whole evening just to count them all. And we need all the potencies that we can gather in order to overcome and overreach the stressors. Now remember that what takes us down neurologically is the ability to override neurologically past negative habits that make us more vulnerable to disease.
Sorry. The microphone is
So people not hearing?
trouble hearing.
Trouble hearing?
Yeah, I think it's okay now.
Can everybody hear now? Okay, so in other words, to change a bad habit, we have to override it with a new habit. And it's the same as all learning. When you learn something, you go to school and you learn something, you repeat it. Eventually you've learned more, and you're more efficient, and you're more focused on what you need to do than you were in the past. So last week we went over what it takes to have longevity, and I'm going to repeat that tonight because it's so important. The first thing one needs every single day to ramp up our neurological development is challenge. So we have to think that we're forcing ourselves to be in a different place than we were the day before, and that we're challenged. It doesn't come easy. The second thing after challenge is that you need to overcome, we are programmed to keep doing the same thing over and over again. It comes from primitive survival, that we survived. We lasted the night and nobody ate us for dinner, and that was because we were able to gain complex abilities, whether it's defending ourselves or nurturing our allies or finding the right nutrients, and we're able to do multitasks. The third thing is human beings, in contrast, like if you read the teachings of the medicine Buddha, and also some of the Jewish mystical teachings, that what are the difference between, let's say, trees in the forest that have relationships and families, and is that they're stuck where they are. Trees and plants, for the most part, can't move from place to place. And the teachings say that's the difference in consciousness. That human beings can handle complex concepts, especially spiritual concepts, and move place to place. We're not stuck in any place. That when you study the movements of religions and spirituality and health, it's all about how do we maintain our ability to be who we are when we move from place to place. So we have powerful levels of consciousness in trees, and where I am, not far away, we have the sequoia, the trees, the redwood trees. And if you walk in a forest full of redwoods, you realize that there's complex relationships, including grandparents and uncles and aunts, and they communicate with each other through the roots, literally like holding hands. And they oversee the surroundings. They can't go from place to place. They can only sit in one place. And then the fourth thing after is nutrition. And it used to be that the forest had all the nutrients we needed, and it was even said in the secret teachings, which had to do with hidden behind all the sacred writings, that each concept existed in order to guide us into being the core of who we are. And so if diseases happened or enemies happened, that all the solutions existed in nature, in the forest, and that all of the diversity of animals and plants and mushrooms, which are a different species, with human beings, that we had all the solutions. I found nothing, and at least nobody's pointed out to me, that nobody really anticipated that human beings would destroy our own solutions. So in the last 50 years, the last I heard is that we've destroyed 59% of all the wildlife, that we keep losing species of plants, we lose mushrooms, and so basically in our goals to have what we think is progress, we're destroying our solutions and beginning to suffer the breakdown of ecology, and also brand new diseases, which we've discussed at length, of diseases that are our own immune systems that evolved over thousands and thousands of years are now in a position that don't recognize it. And COVID-19 is one that it looks like our immune system does not recognize. And I'm not going to go repeat again and again that how do we educate our immune system to recognize when something is foreign and putting us in danger. So the other factor after that is, besides movement, is nutrition. So it's harder and harder to find the right nutrients. Some of them we can't even grow anymore. We have to produce in order to keep our immune system activated and functioning optimally. And what is nurturing? We talked about that war in ancient times, before there was human beings, of vasopressin and oxytocin, two hormones. So they became activated. Vasopressin was what today is considered one of the causes of high blood pressure. They became activated when you have to be ferocious to protect your young from a active predator out in the forest or the jungle or remote areas. And oxytocin is how we keep rejuvenating ourselves. And that's nurturing. That comes from a non-sexual touch. So a sexual touch, besides intimacy, is also the ability to procreate and to connect on different levels. But a non-sexual touch is enabling us to evolve and grow and feel intimacy and feel safe, and also realize that we're not separate, we're a part of everything. And that comes from oxytocin. And it turns out that oxytocin is produced by a non-sexual touch. What I always recommend is going in 9 circles in 2 different directions and going back, while gently touching the front of the body, or the anterior part of the body, particularly the belly, which has its own nervous system. So what happens after we have the support of nurturing and that connection? What do we do with it? And that's the dilemma that the world is having right now. The dilemma is, what's our purpose? And where is the purpose? And have we lost the direction of the purpose in our lives? Without a purpose, that's separate from our individual benefit, we begin to involute and self-destruct. So we need to have a purpose, so the other 5 levels get to a level where we just start generating a unique purpose. Now, we look at ancient literature. I was going to talk about ancient literature and purpose. That if you look at the 5 books of Moses, the first letter in the 5 books of Moses is a beit, or a B. And if you take all 5 books and it ends, the last letter is a lamed, which means to learn. The beit, by the way, means to house. So our purpose in our life is to house a consciousness that propels us to produce a level of spiritual understanding that means every moment of our life we have an expanding purpose in how we breathe, how we interact, how we respect the land, how we respect nature, how we respect creation, and respect our food. And that we take our responsibility not only to protect those that are vulnerable, but also we take our opportunity to protect our own young, so they're not caught up and confused by their own desire. One of the big illusions that the young people today, is that what they are is not sufficient. And that they need something outside themselves in order to complete themselves.
I have a question. Where do you think that came from, that belief that we're not sufficient? Because all the nature of nature and humanity is that we are perfect the way we are. Where do we get these ideas as children, as teenagers and adults, that we are not good enough?
Because what makes us survive in a hostile environment, in a jungle, is that we have to survive for more than what we have now. There was always periods of time where there wasn't enough for survival. So survival is for survival. We have a job to survive this pandemic, and one of the first things I realized was to learn what we need to know about it so we can overcome it and produce something more elegant, more beautiful, and more powerful. And that's ingrained in us. We're told in our subconscious part of our brain is that we need to keep doing what we've done before. We're told that we survived, it worked. Don't change what you're doing. It's a physical survival. And once we master that, we can survive. Then how do we overcome that to produce something more? So the spiritual masters told us that it has to come through the heart. That the heart itself is what the two letters we talked about, the lamed and the bet, it spells heart. And heart is equal to the number 32, and 30, in other words, that if we want to recover from the trauma of our physical life on this planet and become more open spiritual beings, that every day life itself improves because of our efforts, that there are 32 different pathways back to self through the heart. And that's why if you look at one of the most ancient teachings in Hinduism, in the Vedanta teachings, they always say, and they've said this for thousands of years, there are multiple pathways back to the same source. And that's that, and all of them are valuable, and all of them are needed.
Can you just talk a little bit, before we jump into how to get back to the heart, what does it mean to be back at your heart?
To be back at your heart is being honest with yourself of what you really need to function, and then what if you need more than what you need to function on an everyday basis. I mean, what's the effort? Do you need to, how many crops do you need to grow? How strong a house do you have to have? How much clothes do you need to have? Those are all considered from the 32 just as how much we need, and be able to generously give up what we don't need. So the heart is understanding how the structure of physical life had to step down from the potential, which is the idea, to become something that we can sit with and realize that we are just a stop along the way of consciousness happening from energy becoming super fast and therefore becoming super heavy, that we can have a concrete experience. And the whole idea of the 5 books of Moses was that consciousness as it expands, the same letters will come about that produced the 5 books that were, from what I understand from studying with people many years ago, was really tonal frequencies, and then it got translated into energy and motion, which became language and became a story. So as you and I and all the people that have worked so hard to be of value to others have taken their experience and translated it into being authentic and generous and elegant in consciousness, and realizing that that same conscious movement brought about an existence that has a core that stems from the heart. So the heart, from a neurological standpoint, has its own nervous system. It's not just the brain. Is that coming through?
Yeah, no, it's good. Just wanted to make sure that's working. Sorry guys for a quick interruption. Yeah, so what you're saying, really being at your heart is being, as you mentioned many times, knowing your purpose, being
your purpose,
being connected to the fact that you are a greater consciousness, experiencing this this very physical experience on this earth, and being honest with yourself, what your needs are.
Well, it's not just your needs. It's been realizing, if you look at, I wasn't going to go in tonight, this goes into deeper mysticism, but if you look at our origin, in my opinion, what people that I've learned from, is the truth. And the truth is being one with your Creator and allowing your life to be an expression of the deepest concept of creation.
But how does one allow that? Do you sit on the chair and repeat to yourself, I allow my life to be, in the flow of the greatest Creator? What is that,
I think saying things to yourself like that is not going to do very much good. It's the choices you make.
Yeah.
And not being judgmental.
Because a lot of teachers, spiritual teachers that I've learned, and I'm sure you learned from through life, they say, oh, let go your past, let go your fears, allow and accept, and all these nice words, really good to hear. But when it comes to reality, to somebody's daily living, how does that translate in our everyday life?
I don't think it doesn't. I think the spiritual teachers that tell you you need to do this and you need to do that have never been parents. You can't tell your children what to do. So how can you tell your students what to do? You have to give them options and tell them what the benefit, and come from your heart that it's feelings. It's oxytocin. It's how do we include as many beings, not just humans, our relationships to all the other species. We just lost a gigantic in one of the refuge. It was a wild elephant, beautiful elephant. On one of the rare occasions, elephants get in fights with other elephants, but it's almost rare. And he lived in the forest, in the wilderness, but adjacent to a sanctuary where some of the orphan elephants were rehabilitated. And when they were rehabilitated, when their parents were slaughtered, this elephant, I think his name was Kagyu, would come visit the sanctuary and take around these children and take them out to the forest to show them the life, how it was in the wilderness, and help rehabilitate themselves. And he would teach them how to, because they were only used to, since they were babies, to human caretakers, giving them bottles of milk and training them. And the whole idea of the sanctuary is to teach them how to be elephants, living with other elephants out in the wilderness. And he got into a fight and got wounded, and when he was found, it was too late for the veterinarians to save his life.
So what you're really telling us that there was this man who had the calling, he lived with one with nature and purposeful life. Like he was his purpose, right? He lived his purpose, and yet he died. But
this was an elephant. This was not.
Oh, there's an elephant.
It wasn't a man.
So what's the moral of the story? What's the learning here?
That we are part of all of life. We're not different. That we're not the only ones that go to war and fight with each other and kill each other. It's rare for elephants to kill other elephants. It's not rare for humans to kill other humans. And so, by being part of nature and it's watching what life itself will teach you. We're all struggling to create a powerful, focused consciousness and have a purposeful life, and we have to overcome our resistances. Nowadays, you can turn on a computer, a cell telephone, you can imagine you're everywhere, and it prevents you from having the multiple level of communication and knowledge that happens from having to struggle from without. And that's by the elephant that just died last week, actually this week, I guess it was last week, less than a week ago, he was teaching them, these young elephants, what they need to know to survive in a world that doesn't always have your best interest in mind. You have to learn the skills. You have to know what you keep and what you don't keep.
So as our spiritual teacher, what are you teaching us, what to keep and what not to keep?
You have to be true to yourself. And one of the most dangerous things that I've seen is the distractions of thinking that you actually need certain things. It's okay to want things and have them, but if you actually feel that you can't exist without them, you're creating a false reality. And then to get back to what's real, you have to find a pathway, and according to the deepest mystical teachings, there are 32 different pathways to get back to what's authentic through your heart.
So let's start with number one. What's the first pathway?
I don't know if they're listed that way. But I mean, one of the first pathway is to give up something that you like, but it has too high a price around you. It affects the earth, it affects other living beings, and it's pleasurable, and it's nice to have, but you actually need it.
So what would be a good example of that?
A good example would be, from my life. When I was a little boy, my mother felt she was doing me good by giving me a gigantic piece of German chocolate cake and ice cream, and I didn't want it. And my mother felt, that I was insulting her. And I remember as a little boy hiding in the closet, not wanting so thinking because something is sweet and fun, it's something you have to have.
But in a modern human today, like what would one of your patients, if you were to imagine that they would say, okay, what can I I want to take the first step back to my heart, and I want to give up something in my life, what could that be?
Touch. And which we're in a time where you can't touch. Well, it's not a wise idea to touch.
So give up touch.
Not give up touch. Find a way to incorporate touch back. I was walking.
To add touch, okay, so.
We need touch. Without that's nurturing. I saw a bunch of teenagers today in the street in downtown Palo Alto, and none of them had masks. None of them. They were all joking and hugging each other and holding hands and laughing, and I'm going, oh my God, yet that's exactly what we need to grow. If you're not touched, if you're not nurtured, remember there's 6 things you need to evolve, you're going to have a deficit. And yet we're scared that from touch we're going to get very sick from a virus.
Yeah.
And is that potential? I mean, look at the panic. We're following all these rules, and part of me feels it's ridiculous. You know, that's not how viruses work. And we had a heavyweight champion of the world in the 1930s, Joe Louis, and he was going to fight the light heavyweight champion, Billy Conn. And everybody was asking him. Billy Conn was like super fast, really fast, and Joe Louis was much bigger than him, and he was powerful. And they said, well, how are you going to catch up with Billy Conn, who was much smaller than him? And he said, Joe Louis said, he can run, but he can't hide. So we can run from the virus. We can lock ourselves in our room.
But you
can't hide. So what do? My opinion, this is my opinion, remember there's 31 other opinions that are just as valid, was we educate our immune system so it recognizes what's a danger to us. And we recognize that we have a purpose in life. If I made one person in my whole life a little easier, then I've lived my purpose. I don't need something grandiose. If I had one sick person that had to do something unique, and because I figured out how to help them, I took the time and effort, or I studied for all these years, and I found something that works, then I've reached my purpose.
But then, so if following what you're saying, if you've helped a person or you've done something that felt altruistic and good,
No, I don't think it's about feeling you're altruistic or good.
Oh, but you as you said, like you studied something
But that doesn't personally mean anything to me.
But you fulfilled your purpose. So does that mean that you are free for the rest of your life?
No, I hope not.
I mean,
it's an ongoing thing.
It's an ongoing thing, right?
Yeah, and if you feel that you've earned something, I can tell you one thing: you didn't earn anything. It's never about you.
What is it about then?
It's about the ability to purify what has become polluted. We live on an earth that's a paradise. And maybe one day I can go into what the paradise is, because it's right in the sacred writings. We were given a paradise which opens hidden doors to most incredible regions that in existence that allow life to continue in a unique way that expands an elegant, non-local consciousness. And that if anybody thinks that this is all there is, and this is a lot, they're missing out on a lot that they're not recognizing.
Okay.
But it's never about what you've accomplished and what you've done.
It's always what's next, where you're going to fulfill your purpose next.
It's how you live. There's a mystical teachings that for the world to exist, there has to be a 36 just people. That's an old teaching. And that if you want to be one of the 36, and there's some beautiful stories about these people, they're usually mundane people. They're not best-selling authors. They're not people teaching workshops with thousands of people. They're not people selling books that teach you how to attract wealth and admiration. They're usually things like tailors or shoemakers or farmers. And the minute they suspect they're one of the just, they lose their position. And one of the most influential books I read in my life back in the 1960s was called The Last of the Just by André Schwartz Bart in France. It was a bestseller in Europe, where he said that the last of the just died in a concentration camp. And he never wrote another book. But before he died, he allowed another book that he wrote to be released, and it was called Morning Star. And nobody knew. He told his wife he didn't want it ever released, and then on his deathbed, he said 3 times Morning Star, and then his wife and son took that as that he changed his mind. And he talked about a race that escaped planet Earth and went to a different star system. And then some of the descendants, 1.5 million years later, wanted to figure out what went wrong on Earth. And it was called Morning Star.
Okay. So if any of you are curious about that, you can look up the book. What are other pathways? What are other ways to get back to your heart?
The way to get back to your heart is to gradually teach yourself to come from your feelings and not from your intellect. If you want to build computers, you want to build houses, you want to create structures, and which is all good. You should do that. But you're not going to get back to where your origin is and where you're at peace with yourself. It has to come through the heart. And it happens from forgiveness. But a lot of people are saying, teach people to forgive. Well, everybody's been harmed by relatives and other people or other nations and all this, and we need to forgive them. And that's a powerful teaching. But nobody is able to forgive anybody until they forgive themselves. We all were given a unique potential. And how we choose to express our life is the answer to who we are. And if we get attracted to things that are fine, they're nice, but it removes us from being who we really are, there's a lot that we have to forgive first. You don't heal other people until you can forgive yourself.
Well, forgiving yourself, it's the topic that, again, a lot of people encounter through their life. And I personally went through the journey of forgiveness, forgiving myself. But I yet to find that saying I forgive myself doesn't conduct the act of forgiveness.
Of course not. It has nothing to do with that.
So again, I go back to this very practical level of knowledge. If one wants to forgive themselves, from the bottom of their heart, from the hearts of hearts, what do they need to do for that to happen in their heart?
It's number one thing. They have to be able to be not afraid of the consequences of giving up what's most familiar. And one of the things that changed my life was one of the trainings I did with the Dalai Lama, where he said we are drawn to what's familiar that gives us the most suffering and torment. So if we keep repeating what we learned, we'll not get to our destination. We'll keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And we won't even know until it's too late that we spent a life being tormented and feeling that we didn't get what we deserved. Because our purpose is that we're part of oneness. I think we went into that once.
Yeah,
a different part of
we
this.
talked about this, yes.
And so we're part of everything else.
But again, it's very hard to understand these concepts and wrap them around in your head. And if we come back to this concept,
It's not intellectual.
I understand. You mentioned that we need to go to our feelings. So how do we forgive on our feeling level, on the sensory, that energy or whatever level? And I don't know. There might not be an answer. It might be everybody has a different journey to forgiveness. But I thought maybe you could share with us a practical tool or a ritual or practice that one could enable in their daily routine to live the path of forgiveness.
Well, the first thing is to be unselfish and generous. And a lot of people want to give charity and want to feed the hungry and want to, do things for others. But before you can do any of that, one of the lessons I remember, it took me a long time to get what we were talking about. There was a great Indian master named Atisha who came up with the 7-point mind training, where most of the points had to do with the mother, with the female, which is about self-sacrifice. So, nobody embodies self-sacrifice more than a mother. And the first concept that Atisha talked about was that everything that exists at one point in time, which is beginningless time, was before time was ever measured, played the role of your mother.
To yourself or to somebody else?
To yourself.
So mothering yourself.
No, not about mothering yourself. That everything in life, how can you have all this anger or this feeling that you were mistreated when at some point whatever hurt you was once in pain because it played the role of your mother?
Okay, I'm trying to...
That's a deep teaching.
It's a very deep teaching. It's a very deep thought, because it goes into your parents. It goes into everybody who's alive had a mother or have a mother.
You don't exist without a mother, and you
mother.
didn't exist. Nothing exists without something self-sacrificing, giving up of itself.
So self-sacrifice could be one of the ways where you embrace forgiveness to yourself.
Yeah, but if you come out and say, I'm doing this so I can forgive myself, you're on the wrong path. The idea of doing it for yourself, you're doing it so you can become the embodiment of compassion. Compassion comes from wanting to heal yourself so you can be a fuller service to everyone else in your life. That's compassion, not feeling sorry for somebody or rescuing somebody. It's making yourself an example.
So let's say you are a doctor. You could say that you have a level of self-sacrifice to be at service to your patients.
Maybe, but that's not what they're talking about. We're talking about lifetime after lifetime, perfecting yourself. So there's an example out there. Somebody can look at you and say, see, he overcame a horrible childhood. He overcame a war with everybody from his community was slaughtered, and somehow he hid and survived, and then dedicated his life to making other lives better. And that's an example. But if you're doing it for any ulterior motives, it doesn't work. Because if you do it with ulterior motives, truth doesn't grow into trust.
That's a confirmation by the train.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's anything to do with you, all the masters that I've had the fortune of studying with in Jerusalem and Tibet and all these places that I've been, go on and on, not one of them talked about themselves. Not one of them mentioned what they were doing. Not one of them, if you're doing it for a personal purpose, then you don't get into, how can anybody trust you? You have an ulterior motive.
But isn't there a belief that everything and anything we do has this egotistical idea underneath that we're still doing it for ourselves?
I know that's stuff, but it's not true. There are people that existed that passed that by. Not just people, not humans. There are other things. It's much more common in some of the superconscious animal worlds that we exist in this planet. There are dolphin species that are 500% more evolved in that way than humans. Elephants, they have sophisticated languages, and none of them have it's part of their nature to be self-sacrificing and loyal. It's humans that have become very material and we're taught something false, which all this exists for our own purpose and our own enjoyment. But is that our own enjoyment? Is that our own pleasure? If you study the history of oxytocin, which we've talked about with nurturing, that evolved over a long period of time, and that had to do with creating the feeling from you that you're healing and you're giving is something to focus on. And if you're focused on it, it encourages people to be more than what they thought they were before.
So that gives like the bigger, something bigger than yourself. There's something like, we talked about purpose or self, something vision. We have a question from where did the question go? Sorry, I will look into questions. So let me have a look. For some reason I can't.
Someone could enable.
Well, if you look at the wolf family, the wolf family doesn't sit around and hire professionals to discuss family dynamics. Each one in the family is happy to protect others and feed others. And they work together. It's part of the nature. Only humans intellectualize themselves out of personal responsibility and feel that they need to tear down forests and build big edifices And I can tell you from living in Silicon Valley that a lot of people with the most wealth are the most miserable people you ever want to meet.
Yeah.
A lot of them can't even be in the same house with their spouse and their kids, and no matter how much they get, it's not enough because it won't fill what's lacking in them, which is truth.
So would you say then that this self-forgiveness and self-sacrifice that we talked about could be also another pathway to your heart?
It can be accessed through the heart, but a lot of it is willing to accept that I could have made a choice that would have had more benefit than the one I made.
So it's
How
about
many-
the choices you make.
Yeah, it's about what you choose. In mysticism, they always said that if you look at the tree of life, every time you make a choice, there was a total of 6 options, and your choice was the 7th. And even in physics, there's a physicist, one of the great physicists, Everett, who said that each choice you make, the fact that you didn't make another one, meant that you created a parallel universe from the choice you didn't make that would have had infinite ramifications.
So there is somewhere Gerald Cohen in the universe that became a musician and made a different choice. Well, there is a version of you, the choice that you didn't make. Is that what you're saying? Clearly, right?
Clearly, I didn't always make the great choices, especially who I choose to be with.
How does one know that you made a great choice? Like, how do I know that I made a great choice?
I think you feel it in the gut.
If you have a healthy gut, right?
You have to have a healthy gut.
You have to have a healthy gut to know that you made the right choice.
You know if you're expressing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was a kid, what caused me to travel as a teenager around the world was I thought I was being rejected from my girlfriend. I mean, that's literally what happened. Her name was Marie. And we worked in the same restaurant. She was a waitress, but she was a lot older than me. And then she dropped me suddenly and then told me to go away for 2 years and travel and then come back, and if I still wanted to be with her, she'd wait for me. So that's what I did. I traveled all over the world, and then I came back and realized that I had grown.
Yeah.
It would be impossible for me to be with her.
Yeah.
So she married somebody and ended up having 6 children and living in Monticello, New York.
Well, what a wise woman, right? What a wise person.
Yeah.
What a good advice.
Well, she knew. She said if I ended up being with her, which in those times was very different than now, I would resent her.
Yeah.
She would get in my way and stop being my way.
Yeah. That's true. All right, so we're nearing to 8 o'clock.
You said there was some questions?
Yes, so Deborah posted a question and she said she deleted the question because you already answered that question.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that just naturally happened in the flow. All right, so I think we're going to get ready.
You said there's one other question, no?
Meditation. No, that's it. But people seem to connect to the forgiveness topic and topic about the heart. And I think we just scratched really the surface of what really forgiveness is, and we might do some practical exercises maybe next time, and to guide people through the process of forgiveness. How does it feel like?
Well, before you can get into forgiveness, first of all, I don't want to distract you, but I personally don't like beliefs. I had the fortune, one of the major fortunes in my life was having breakfast with Robert Monroe from the Monroe Institute back in 1990. And one of the things he said to me was that the whole point of human evolution of consciousness is to point towards knowledge. So I'm never interested in what people tell me what they believe, because when you believe something, you don't know. And he said we have to build knowing systems. So knowing systems is what we're just in the beginning of building. And when we know something, we know something. And if we know something, then we can pick individual pathways through the heart. And we have endless sacred writings that can guide us. But until we actually get into knowing, and people are afraid to admit when they don't know something. I always thought it was an opportunity to find out all the things I don't know, in order to learn. I never had a problem with somebody pointing out what I don't know. I usually don't have patience for people to tell me what I do know.
Yeah.
So we build all these systems of what we believe because we're afraid to touch what we do know. And what we do know, that each one of us listening tonight has overcome impossible odds. I know I'm repeating myself, to have this opportunity to create consciousness and to expand each other's worlds by being samples of different pathways of how we can embody that and have people that are so awesome that they make people around them happier and healthier.
All right, so with that, we're going to go into tonight's meditation. Thank you everybody watching tonight. As usual, it's a lot of fun for us to be here and brainstorm on the topics and talk about these deep ideas with Dr. Cohen, who is true embodiment of all this knowledge and knowing.
By the way, I don't feel that way, but that's another story.
That's another, it's not about feeling, but there's always more. We are never done, as you say.
Right.
The more, I think you mentioned that there is somebody said that I'm sad that I'm not gonna, somebody that I read or heard, or you said, that he said, I'm sad that I will not live long enough to know and to learn everything that I want to learn.
That was Moses.
So here you go. So we don't have enough time in this lifetime. Maybe through lifetimes and lifetimes we can truly learn and discover what we really want to know. But with that, we're gonna just send everybody into meditation. And again, just a reminder that we are opening our practice, so you're welcome to come to our practice if you're healthy and if you are social distancing and adhering to the guidelines. We'd be happy to see you to come and experience Dr. Cohen's touch, and let us know if you have any questions.
Also, if you want a bottle of the longevity formula when it comes out, so we don't have the chaos that we had months ago with viral defense, just get on the list, because those on the list will get to it first. And if you have all the tools that, if you've been listening carefully, you can, if you have longevity, you have life. And if you have life, you have a unique purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody. Take a gentle breath. And see and feel your breath embodying the light that creates an expanded consciousness. And that if you're here and you're experiencing the light, you already know how to do this. You've already been exposed to this. All we need is a reminder. And this is not about belief. It's about you dedicating your life that becomes universal knowledge. The more we know together, not by ourselves, not one being can do this themselves, the more we become the pioneers of knowledge. And then when we can build a knowledge system, we can use that as a tool to help coming up with the solutions to begin to heal this planet itself. And this planet and our families and our communities. And as I said before, I strongly don't feel there's such a thing as race, except the races that we've created in our own finite human minds. That we're all humans. We all have potential. We all have purpose. And the color of the skin has only to do with experience and what we've suffered from, but has nothing to do with something that's innate with us. I've had the fortune of being guided and taught by so many masters from so many different colors and traditions and cultural experiences, that the more diverse we experience, the quicker our own evolution. And every living being on this planet came to this planet because our purpose is to plant life in this planet. So now let's take a deep breath. Let's acknowledge to ourselves that we'll forgive ourselves for mistakes we made. We forgive others that caused us pain and suffering because of mistakes others made. And understand that this is all a weeding process to reach the truth. And the truth is our origin. And so we want to train ourselves to be truthful. So take a few moments and visualize yourself embodying truth without boundaries. Truth that connects our source, our origin, with our future potential. And realize we have the perfect environment to help propel and create consciousness that will exist forever. Take a few moments and I'll join you shortly. Just watch your breath. Let go of any tension or discomfort. Let go of any suffering. And underneath that is who you really are. Take a few moments and I'll join you shortly. I'll take a moment and notice something familiar. Something that you're 100% sure exists. That leads and guides you. That gives you value. That's foundational. And now allow it to dissipate. And just watch it till it becomes like dust in the wind. And notice if anything continues to exist after it dissipates. Now take a moment and notice, do you feel freer or do you feel threatened? Do you feel like you don't exist without what you know? Or do you feel free and able to see and look at what is familiar, and that you know your direction is knowledge, where you can differentiate what exists no matter what you do or what you think, that's always been there and always will be there. Which comes directly from the clear and pure light. Just bathed in the emptiness. And notice when you feel blissful, and many of you are close. That blissfulness and that formlessness eventually opens the door to wisdom. That we're part of the, we talked about some weeks ago, the Yichud, the oneness. And nothing exists without us, and everything exists with us. And what exists has always existed. It all comes from the beginning of this time. Like an acorn within an acorn. We keep recreating incredible possibilities. And we need to remember that all suffering is just fertilizer. To deep, potent, potential. All. Just sit with it. Notice that you're becoming lighter and peaceful. And the boundaries were just boundaries of imagination. And notice how you're being touched by trust, and how grateful you are. And that opens the gates of boundaryless, ultimate love. Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Open your eyes, take a deep breath, and just be the amazing person that you were born to be. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Good night.